Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Thursday, April 20th, 2023. If you'd like additional weather information, you can always go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence, and you can get a forecast with any relevant watches, warnings, or advisories for anywhere in the country. Pretty active across the middle portion of the lower 48 this Thursday afternoon. We have tornado watch, southern Wisconsin, Chicago area, northern Illinois, with severe thunderstorm watches trailing southwestward into Texas. Winter storm warnings, northern Minnesota. Red flag warnings for critical fire weather conditions across areas of the Ohio-Tennessee Valley, as well as back out across the southern Rockies, in through New Mexico, southeast Colorado, and into parts of Kansas and the Texas-Oklahoma panhandles. Here in Alaska, a taste of early spring weather. The panhandle enjoying a beautiful day. Temperatures have been in the mid-upper 50s with even a few lower 60-degree readings. Klawak as of mid-afternoon was 63 degrees, and it'll be another warm one, especially across the northern and central parts of the panhandle Friday afternoon, though some showers and moisture will be creeping up from the south across the southern portions of the panhandle in advance of a frontal system out over the lower Gulf and North Pacific. A strong cold front will impact the central and eastern interior, especially along the eastern half of the Brooks Range, dropping all the way down in through the Alaska Range. As we go through later Friday and Saturday and Sunday, the cold air will back up all the way down to the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim basins by the time we get into later Sunday and early Monday. And that'll be accompanied by gusty northeast winds, areas of light snow and blowing snow, especially along the interior highway summits. This overall cooler pattern will persist then through the end of the month over the mainland, especially centered on the southwestern parts of the state, with above normal precipitation over the south central areas. Fort Yukon, look at the increasing clouds to the north, 34 degrees. That's in advance of the cold front that'll be approaching tomorrow. Tanana, crystal clear sky there, 37 degrees. Temperatures along the Yukon River have warmed into the upper 30s and lower 40s this afternoon. McGrath, 40 degrees. Further south and west toward Bethel, Telesac at 36 degrees with clear skies, and even some of that colder air is going to work its way southwestward back toward the lower Yukon and Kuskokwim deltas by the time we get into early Monday morning. So a winter weather advisory has been issued for Friday late afternoon through midnight Saturday night for the eastern half of the Brooks Range due to some strong gusty winds, 30-40 miles an hour, accompanied by snow showers, reduced visibility at times, and then a broad area of the central eastern interior, Bettles, Fort Yukon, Arctic Village, down through Eagle, 40-mile, Gold Country, Fairbanks, Tanana. We'll see occasional snow showers, much colder temperatures, and gusty northeasterly winds, especially during the day on Saturday and continuing into Sunday. Satellite imagery shows a low circulation well southeast of Haida Gwaii off the British Columbia coast. Sunshine, though, has allowed temperatures to recover into the 50s across much of the panhandle, with isolated 60-degree readings, and areas of south central have enjoyed temperatures in the 40s to near 50 degrees, and readings even up around 40 degrees have been as far north as the central upper Yukon River this Thursday afternoon. Now, low pressure, you can see that low there southeast of Haida Gwaii. There is a low pressure way down in the North Pacific, well south of the Alaska Peninsula, but notice that cold front that's up there along the Beaufort Sea. A big Arctic high pressure up over the Arctic Ocean is going to flex its muscle, and that's going to force colder air southward, especially along the eastern half of the mainland. Late tonight, early Friday morning, the cold front approaching Kaktovik and then pushing southward to near Fairbanks by Friday afternoon. Gusty winds along and behind that front, 30-40 miles an hour, with occasional snow showers causing blowing snow as well. And on Saturday, that front pushes all the way down down to and just south of the Alaska Range. So we expect those conditions to follow along with that. And with the cold northeasterly winds, it's going to push colder air all the way into along the southwestern interior by the time we get into Sunday and early Monday. Meanwhile, it becomes wetter pattern develops here for the weekend across the Panhandle, with rain returning to many areas, some snow in the higher coastal mountains. Temperature-wise, lows tonight generally above freezing there in the Panhandle, near or below freezing south central. And temperatures Friday afternoon maybe not quite as warm there in southern Panhandle. Again, mid-upper 50s pretty common, and isolated 60-degree reading can be ruled out. And across south central, 40s, a few 50-degree readings showing up there. Willow on up toward and Wasilla on up toward Talkeetna. Saturday morning lows above freezing, 30s to near 40 across most of the Panhandle, and around or a bit above freezing, especially from the Anchorage Bowl southward. And for Saturday afternoon, temperatures will be again upper 40s, near 50 beneath the rain there in the southern Panhandle, and areas of south central cooling down a little bit, more likely in the upper 30s to lower 40s. In the far north, temperatures tonight will be generally down in the teens and 20s. Still readings up around 40 degrees as you get up through the central Yukon Valley, say Galena on up through Tanana. But notice the cold air Saturday morning below zero there, the North Slope and Arctic coast. And Saturday afternoon, the colder air advances further southward, readings slipping into the teens across the Yukon Flats. Still above freezing middle and lower Yukon. And then for Friday morning, for the southwest interior, temperatures will be in the teens to lower 20s, above freezing across the outer portions there of the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians. Friday afternoon highs as you go up the Kuskokwim River. You can see readings still getting back up in the lower, even mid-40s, 44 there at McGrath. And for Saturday morning, starts to cool down off there along around Norton Sound. And then temperatures Saturday afternoon still will be generally above freezing in the 30s. Still some 40-degree readings the south end of the Alaska Range and extending out along the Alaska Peninsula. But the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook to close out the month still has the greatest likelihood of below normal temperatures centered on the southwestern portion of the mainland, with near normal temperatures across the Panhandle. And the pattern is going to shift. We're going to start to get more of a south and southwesterly flow coming in off the Gulf. So we do expect in the final days of April precipitation to average above normal over south central areas, south of the Alaska Range, centered around the northern end of Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, and the Kenai Peninsula. And above normal precipitation could extend all the way north up past the Brooks Range.
Welcome, this is Crane Johnson, a hydrologist with the Alaska Pacific River Forecast Center, bringing you your 2023 Alaska Breakup Outlook here on Thursday, April 20th. We're still about 2 weeks away from breakup on our larger rivers in Alaska, so now's the time to be flood ready. Check with your local community, prepare your family and pets, prepare your home, know your flood risk, and as always, stay aware of local river conditions. There's three main components we consider when we look at the breakup outlook. The first is snowpack, the second is ice thickness and strength, and the third most important component are spring weather patterns. It's the late April and early May temperatures that control the snowmelt rate and the thermal condition and integrity of the ice, or the strength of the ice. It's these two things, the snowmelt rate and the condition of the ice, that drive which type of breakup we have, whether it's mechanical and ice jams are expected and flooding is possible, or it's a thermal where the ice just tends to melt in place. Mechanical breakups are usually associated with cool April temperatures followed by a rapid warm-up in May. If we look at the three components this spring, we've got an above-average flood potential for most areas of Alaska. Our snowpack throughout Alaska and the Yukon Territory is above average. And while 2023 shares some similarities with last year, it's nowhere near the record snowpack we had in 2022. The upper Yukon Basin, upstream from Eagle, has a slightly above average snowpack with 113% of average, compared to last year at 165% of average. The central Yukon Basin has 122% of average, and that compares to nearly 190% of average last year. And then the Kuskokwim Basin has a similar snowpack to last year, with it estimated at 150% of normal. Snowpacks that drain into Kotzebue Sound are well above average, and this includes the Kobuk and the Buckland rivers. And then the Matanuska-Susitna Basin, the Koyukuk Basin, and the Copper River basins all have above average snowpacks as well. Ice thicknesses throughout the state are trending towards normal or thinner than normal ice. And this is based on limited ice measurements that we do have and accumulated freezing degree days, which is a measure of how cold it was this winter. In addition to the ice measurements, there's been a few ice anomalies that occurred early winter that we'll be monitoring this spring during breakup. The first one is the Upper Yukon River. High water levels combined with a series of freeze-up jams resulted in thicker than normal jumbled ice throughout the Upper Yukon River from Circle all the way up to the border. The Buckland River froze at high water levels and has jumbled ice as well. And then there was a freeze-up jam on the Kuskokwim River below Aniak that resulted in an area of jumbled ice as well. In addition to that, recent measurements in the Bethel area by Bethel Search and Rescue reported ice thicknesses between 40 and 50 inches. Normal for this time of year is 45 inches in the Bethel area. And then McGrath reported thinner than normal ice, and ice that's approximately half as thick as it was last year in 2022. As always, this is the time of year to think twice before you head out on ice. Conditions will change rapidly. If we look at the first half of April, this map shows departures from normal from April 1st through April 15th, and we can see throughout the state it was a cool April. Bethel was 15 degrees below normal, McGrath was 21 degrees below normal, Fairbanks was 15 degrees below normal, and then Eagle was 5 degrees below normal. So we started out the month with below normal temperatures. If we look into the future, we've got the CPC 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, which covers the last week of April. And we can see we expect this trend to continue, with Southwest Alaska having chances of below normal temperatures. And this extends all the way through the entire Kuskokwim Basin, all the way up the Yukon River, extending as far east into Canada, where we expect below average temperatures for this last week of April. If we look a little further out into the future, April 28th to May 4th, we can see that in Southwest Alaska, we expect this pattern to continue with below average temperatures for the lower reaches of the Yukon and the Kuskokwim rivers. And as we head east up the Yukon River, we can see that in the Fairbanks area, we can expect equal chances of above average to below average temperatures. And then we're seeing our first signs of above average temperatures expected in southeast Alaska that extends into extreme eastern interior Alaska. If we combine those three components, the snowpack, the ice thickness, and our April and May temperature outlooks, we're expecting 2023 breakup to trend towards a dynamic breakup where the ice can remain hard and in place. We've got a snowmelt that pushes against it, and these are years when we can expect ice jams and floodings possible. Thermal breakup would be when we've got thinner than normal ice, thinner than normal snowpack, and a smooth, relatively normal spring temperatures. And these are years where we don't get significant ice jams. If we look at our 2023 village flood potential map, we've got 3 sites with a moderate to high flood potential. And these are Buckland on the Buckland River, Circle on the Yukon River, Upper Yukon, and then Aniak on the Kuskokwim River. And then we've got quite a few communities with a moderate flood potential on both the Yukon and the Kuskokwim rivers, as well as Kobuk on the Kobuk River. So overall, throughout Alaska, we're expecting a dynamic breakup. Ice jams are possible, and in some areas, we've got a moderate to high flood potential. If we look at breakup timing, we expect breakup to be late. In eastern Alaska, we expect breakup to be on average 4 to 6 days late. And in Southwest, as we head towards the west, we expect breakup to be delayed even more. In Southwest Alaska, on average, it'll be 5 to 7 days late. One of the first communities on the Kuskokwim River that breaks up is Nikolai, and the average date is April 23rd, and so we expect that to be 5 to 7 days later this year. If we look at our current Alaska breakup map, this is as of today. We've got all of our rivers are frozen and mostly ice, and we're just starting to see mostly open areas in the extreme upper Yukon River. And so that's right around Whitehorse. We've got some mostly open areas. If we look at a satellite image of Whitehorse, this is from March 20th, river's frozen, and then April 11th, we start to see it to begin to open up, and then by April 14th, the river's mostly open just downstream from Whitehorse. As always, each spring, we look for breakup observations throughout the state. You can reach us at our email address, nws.ar.aprfc@noaa.gov, or you can call in observations at 907-266-5160. You can always view our up-to-date Alaska breakup map and also get our graphical breakup outlook on our website as well. The image to the right is from Fresh Eyes on Ice, who's got a system of live webcams throughout the state that update daily. And so this is the Kuskokwim River at Sleepmute, showing the river frozen and solid as of April 19th yesterday. Fresh Eyes on Ice provides a great opportunity to share observations through social media and also contribute data to their citizen science project. Thanks for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another Alaska Breakup Outlook.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, it's now time for your aviation weather, and if you have a flight planned this weekend, as we go through Friday and into Saturday, the main weather story will be a strong cold front that's going to be dropping in across the northern portion of the state, working its way across the Brooks Range, Alcan border, and pushing a late-season batch of Arctic air from the upper Yukon Valley southwestward all the way down toward along the southwest coast by the time we get into the late weekend and early Monday. As this frontal system pushes southward, it will create some gusty northeasterly winds, along with some areas of light snow and blowing snow, especially along areas, some of the summits, higher elevations of the Brooks Range, the middle upper Yukon Valley to the Alcan border, and along the Alaska Range. And as we go through Friday afternoon, we start to see some IFR conditions along and behind that front develop along the far eastern Arctic coast and portions of the eastern North Slope and Brooks ranges, and extending then down into the upper Yukon Valley as we go into Friday evening. And Saturday morning, IFR conditions will exist along areas of the Brooks Range and also further south down around the 40-mile Gold Country, upper Tanana Valley, and up along the central and eastern Alaska Range. For Saturday afternoon, the front will continue to make progress southward, some of the colder air spilling into the upper Copper River Basin, and especially over the southeast interior. We'll also see an area of IFR conditions way out toward the western Aleutians, generally around and west of Adak. Now, for areas of the Brooks Range, Anaktuvuk and Adigan passes will start out Friday with VFR conditions, but as that front begins to move into the area Friday afternoon and evening, conditions will become IFR, certainly, if not Friday evening, overnight Friday night. And then as we go further south and west along the Alaska Range, you'll still see VFR conditions throughout the day on Friday, all the way up there through rainy as well as windy passes eastward through Isabel and Mentasta passes. Further south and west, Copper River Basin VFR conditions, Tanita Pass VFR, as will be along the northern Gulf, Portage Pass VFR conditions, and then finally much of the Panhandle will see VFR conditions, and in the far north, Chilkoot and White will be VFR. Freezing levels aloft. Notice that we have freezing levels around and above 6,000 feet along the Russian Arctic coast associated with a dome of high pressure. This area of high pressure is going to tend to sit in that position. Surface high pressure out over the Arctic Ocean, though, is helping to push that colder air along the Alaskan and Canadian Arctic coast, and that's the cold air mass that will be sliding southwestward as we go through the course of the weekend, especially pushing down between the Brooks and Alaska ranges. We do see freezing levels bump upwards to a bit over 4,000 feet across the northern Gulf and through portions of the southwestern Panhandle, where there could be some scattered mixed rain and snow showers pop up for Friday afternoon. And as a result, we do expect there could be some isolated moderate icing in some of those showers there in parts of the Panhandle, Haida Gwaii above 5,000 feet. Further north, above 3,000 feet there along the eastern Brooks Range, northeast corner of the state. And then further south, there is an area of low pressure in the North Pacific, well south of the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, where we expect some icing above 3,000 and 5,000 feet, but the precipitation down that way is not especially heavy. upper level jet stream pattern has the upper level high and ridge there along the Russian Arctic coast, a low further east of there toward the Canadian Arctic coast, and then a low well south of Kodiak Island. At 9,000 feet, we find winds at 700 millibars to be turning northerly there across northern portions of the state, upwards of 35 knots there through the western Brooks Range, a broad area of 40 to near 50 knot winds across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island in the back circulation around the low in the North Pacific. And then at 3,000 feet, a core of stronger winds exists south of Kodiak Island and the peninsula on the order of 45 to near 60 knots on the backside of that North Pacific low. And the greatest threat for turbulence during the day on Friday will be there along areas of the eastern Aleutian up through the Alaska Peninsula, south end of Kodiak Island, surface to 4,000 feet. There could be some considerable moderate turbulence, a little pocket out there toward the western Aleutians, and then up there in the north, just behind that advancing cold front along the eastern Brooks Range and the northeast Arctic coast, we could see some isolated moderate turbulence surface to 4,000 feet.
Look, the lovely Lyrids are illuminating with fulmination. Hi, Trace here, my fellow stargazers, and this week is the Lyrid meteor shower. The moon sets early, so it should be a good show this year. Let me show you how to see it. Hit the darkness after midnight and look east for a very bright star. That's Vega in Lyra the Harp. That's where the shower gets its name, Lyra, Lyrids. Bring chairs, blankets, warm drinks, and a snack. It'll take 20 to 30 minutes for your night vision to max out, so avoid screens while you look for meteors that are burning up in our atmosphere. The shower peaks on April 23rd, but you'll have a chance to see meteors all week. Astronomically, the Lyrids can drop 20 meteors per hour at their peak. That said, there are sometimes Lyrid fireballs, but can cast shadows and leave behind smoke trails that linger for minutes. So relax, enjoy the show, and keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Let's look now at our sea ice edge before we get into the marine forecast. Areas of the far north along the Arctic coast and Chukchi Sea have extensive ice, though there are a few plinias that have opened along, especially the Arctic coast of Russia. Little areas here and there into the northeast portion of Norton Sound. Further south, though, the more interesting thing is we've kept a northeast to northerly flow that has allowed the ice to push and advance south and westward, and we expect this trend to continue through the weekend as a batch of late season Arctic air is going to work its way southwestward down the length of the Yukon River Valley and eventually off of the YK deltas by the time we get into Sunday night, and especially during the day on Monday. So the ice there will hold along the southwestern coast and actually advance further south and west early next week. And then looking at marine conditions for the Panhandle after a gorgeous Thursday afternoon, winds will be out of the northeast or southeast there, 15 to 20 knots. Waves generally running a few feet. For the outer coast, southeast to east winds, 10 to 15 knots. Waves generally in the 5 to 6 foot range. And for Saturday, winds are going to turn northerly across the central and northern inner channels, including Stevens Passage and Lynn Canal, with waves a couple of feet there. Southeast winds down on the south end of the Panhandle is 20 knots with waves 4 feet there, Dixon Entrance, and up to 9 feet there off of Craig. Winds will be more out of the northeast there once you get to around Gustavus up off of Yakutat Bay with waves of 7 to 9 feet. Variable winds 10 knots off the Kenai coast, waves a few feet, winds trying to turn northerly there and through Prince William Sound with 2 foot waves, and we expect north winds to 15 knots for middle and lower Cook Inlet there at the entrance with waves of 4 feet. On Saturday, variable winds 10 knots within Prince William Sound and off the Kenai coast. Waves only a couple of feet within Prince William Sound, but winds will be out of the north-northwest, especially from around Anchor Point down through the entrance of Cook Inlet with waves of 4 to 6 feet. Across the Alaska Peninsula and Kodiak Island, the winds will generally be northeasterly, 25 to 30 knots on the North Pacific and Gulf side with waves as high as 7 to 11 feet. And on the Bering side, winds will be northeasterly 20 to 25 knots with with waves of 3 to 5 feet away from ice-free areas. And then Saturday, winds will generally be out of the west 15 to 20 knots across Kodiak Island, but northwesterly 15 to 20 knots across the Alaska Peninsula, with waves of 5 to as high as 9 feet just southeast there of Sand Point, 3 to 4 feet on the Bering side. And across the Aleutians, the eastern Aleutians, northeast winds 20-25 knots, becoming more easterly as you go out the length, and east to southeast to 30 knots west of Kiska. Waves generally 10 to 12 feet on the North Pacific side and 6 to 8 feet on the Bering side. And then on Saturday, winds will be out of the northwest through northeast there in the eastern Aleutians, turning more easterly, only at 15 to 20 knots, but winds will pick up to storm force southeast winds in the vicinity of Shimya, west of Kiska, with waves there building over 20 feet. And finally, along areas of the west coast, we have winds northerly 10 to 15 knots, 20 knots out over the open water off of Bristol Bay and near St. Paul, St. George. Waves 5 to 6 feet in open water there. And then winds Saturday, northeast to north winds 20 knots over the ice. The ice is going to advance further south and westward. This trend will continue not just Saturday, but Sunday and into Monday. Along the Arctic coast in Chukchi Sea, winds will be out of the northeast 20 knots there, especially from around Prudhoe Bay to Kaktovik. Winds over the lower Chukchi Sea a bit lighter, only 5 to 15 knots out of the northeast and east, turning into Kotzebue Sound, and then more northerly on the north side of St. Lawrence Island. And for Saturday, winds are going to pick up across the region, generally northeast to north winds 20 to 25 knots, locally as high as 30 knots along some of the capes, such as Cape Lisburne. And the ice in place, there could be some polynyas open up with the result of those stronger winds and some ice movement. But Friday afternoon, that's where the cold front is, that advancing batch of late season Arctic air pushing in through the northeastern portion of the state. Low pressure way down there well south of Kodiak Island in the North Pacific. And for Saturday, that front is going to push further south down along and just south of the Alaska Range, with the colder air eventually backing up all the way in across the southwest interior as we get into late Sunday and Monday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.